X-Fun Carter here with another tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to cover the basics of mapping for AlienSwarm. Now I'm assuming that you already understand core concepts about mapping in Hammer, such as sealing your map, preventing leaks, what materials are, how to texture your map, how to put props in, and so on and so forth. Well, there's just lots of tutorials out there. You don't need me to teach you about basics of Hammer mapping. But there aren't many tutorials about AlienSwarm per se, so I want to talk to you about the basic core fundamental differences with mapping in AlienSwarm as opposed to a first-person shooter. First, most basic one is that when you're looking at your map, you should always be returning to this point of view. It roughly matches that of the game, and that will always dictate you when you're putting in props, adjusting lighting, and so on and so forth. You're always going to return to this view. So that's the first basic difference. Second basic difference is how you seal your map. Actually, this is really a lot easier. The discussion about occlusion and so on in normal source games like first-person shooters like Team Fortress 2 and so on is really complicated, and you have to pay attention to it a lot. But in AlienSwarm, we seal the map in a much simpler way. Yeah, let me just do that right now. I'm going to do your typical maneuver that you do to make a skybox, a noob skybox in Counter-Strike or something like that. You just do this, you just make a big ass box. But in AlienSwarm, that's all you need, which makes life a lot easier. Okay. There, so this is our box. Now I'm gonna seal it in with sky. So far I'm not teaching you anything you didn't know already, but just, hang on a sec. We'll get to this stuff in a minute. I also got to remember to seal it in the bottom here. I'll just do that with black. There. Now, the way we seal our map, just grab this group. We just turn the entire map into not the map, but the shell. Make a box. Call it structure seal. And there you are. And usually what I do is I immediately add this to a user viz group called sealing. That sealing is a user viz group I use to place anything which is in my face when I return to this point of view. I turn that sealing off, and now I can just focus on mapping. Next thing, scaling. Scaling is a different issue in AlienSwarm than it is in other shooters. AlienSwarm being a top-down shooter. In first-person shooters, scaling is straightforward. Everything is just realistically scaled. If you walk up to a light switch, it's going to be the size of a light switch, that sort of thing. But AlienSwarm is different. AlienSwarm, you want to deliberately make some objects larger. So I'll do a basic thing. First thing I do when I put in a map is I put in a prop, and I select a marine, put it in there, so I get a good sense of the true scale. You'll notice the difference between if this was a Half-Life level, that's about the size of a player. This being AlienSwarm, the scaling is a little different. It's close. AlienSwarm characters are slightly larger, just a little bit larger. But the basic thing with scaling is this. Your player view being up here, small details in the map, you have to make larger. Whereas in a first-person shooter, it's easy. You make a new prop or a new entity, or you put in a prop, and realistic scale is fine. It doesn't work with Alien Swarm. And as an example, this guy here, this radio. I built this radio. Looks like an army radio. I actually used these suckers when I was in the army. Oops, where are we? Yeah, so I made this radio because there wasn't a good military-style radio in existence. Alright, so here I've assembled my radio. It's made of 3 props, one for the antenna, one for the headset, and one for the body of the radio. From this point of view, you know, your eye switches. If you were the player, this could be your Marine. Your eye switches back and forth. And somehow your eye can compensate. But if I take this and I move it beside the Marine, you'll see that this radio is like half of his body size. Like, in theory, this is a backpack radio. He could be carrying this radio on his back. But the thing is, for these key props, like mission-specific props, you want to make them big. And you compensate. You don't worry about the player. There's nothing you can do about the player. If the player runs up beside that and compares, you know, the illusion is broken. But players don't normally do that. Their eye moves so quickly back and forth. Even if they come close, they won't necessarily take a moment to consider the scaling. But, you know, if I were to make this radio for a first-person shooter, it would have to be realistic size. And I can put in an actual radio from this guy here, which is from Left 4 Dead. Now, this is a walkie-talkie radio. It should be the same size as the handset in my radio. But look at the size of it. That's a realistic sized radio. Anyway, I think you get the point that, you know, if I turn off this other radio setup and my camera's up here, I look at that thing, and that thing is, it's like a speck. I can hardly see it. So that's why I make a great big freaking huge radio, because I want the player to notice it. I consider this to be a key prop. So that's one element of scaling. The rest of the world, floors and pipes and the environment, I would leave at realistic scaling. Doesn't make sense to try to make, you know, pipes and railings huge. You have a giant map with a little mouse-like character in it. Anyway, so when something is a key prop or a key visual, and when something isn't, is a judgment call.